It normally takes a couple of minutes for people to log on. The numbers we've got to today are actually fantastic.
So far, I've got 19 people on the webinar now and counting.
Hi, Stella. How are you doing? We should catch up soon. I hope you've got some good questions for us. So many thanks everybody for joining. We're still waiting for a couple more minutes for people to gradually join today's webinar. So we'll just wait a couple more minutes. Okay, everybody, I've been given the instruction to start, so let's kick things off. First of all, many thanks everybody for joining us today. We've had a fantastic sign up to this particular topic, so we're totally chuffed that everybody's agreed to come along and give us their hour. Let me introduce myself very quickly. My name is Philip Jarman. I am co-founder and COO of CESO Global. I'm delighted you've all joined us today, where we can delve into the subject of buying off-plan property in Nigeria, with a specific case study of Landmark's Waterview apartments that are due to be built this year. We'll be discussing the opportunities of buying off-plan as well as the risks. How to mitigate those risks, essentially by potentially by using some clever lawyers, such as those from UUBO, who can help buyers buy with their required level of trust. To provide you with a bit of an overview of today's webinar, I'm delighted to be joined by Mr. Paul Oyewibi. Paul really needs no introduction, and I'll provide a more in-depth introduction later on. He is CEO of Landmark Africa Group. We're delighted to have him join today. Paul will be discussing the opportunities of buying off-plan properties with a particular view on Landmark's Waterview apartments. And we're also joined by Mr. Akindeo Onajobi. He's an experienced property transaction lawyer at UUBO, and he'll be talking to us about how we can potentially mitigate the risks around buying off-plan. So I'll move on to a bit of an introduction about CESO, about what we do, as well as providing insights into questions people have raised when buying off-plan properties in this market. We'll then move on to a panel discussion, more in-depth conversation with Paul about the development at Waterview, and then moving on to a discussion with Mr. Akindeo about how we can mitigate those risks when buying off-plan. And please, throughout this, please send us your questions. There will be a Q&A at the end, and we'd be delighted to pose your questions to our panelists. This really is an interesting subject, and we have two fantastic speakers with us. So next slide, please, Sharon. So very quickly, introduction about myself. My name is, as mentioned, Philip Jarman, co-founder and CEO of CESO Global. Before I co-founded CESO with my business partner, Daniel Block, I worked in finance. So I worked for a big Swiss bank called UBS Wealth Management, generating investment strategies for ultra high net worth Africans, particularly Nigerians. So I've been working in Africa for well over 10 years now, and I founded CESO, co-founded CESO with Daniel after my MBA to really increase the level of trust within the property transaction process in emerging markets in this part of the world. Next slide, please, Shane. I'm delighted to once again introduce everybody very quickly to our new logo. We have rebranded, and I think the way that we've rebranded suits the topic of discussion today. The 3 lines that you can see, that obviously represents a building, but they also represent themes that are really of central importance and of value to us as a company. That's trust, transparency, and technology. Trust, the words already come up, is of central importance to us as a company. We want to instill a greater sense of trust within the property transaction process in this part of the world. Trust comes with transparency, and we think that we can achieve both trust and transparency through the use of technology. We are a prop tech company, so it's obviously meant to symbolize the building as well, the 3 lines. But the building in the middle and the circle also represents a key. And it's how many properties, many pieces of real estate are unlocked through the use of a key. So moving very quickly on, next slide, please, Sharon. A bit about what we do and the insights that we've had. So it's very simple. What do we do? Part of our business is as a digital real estate broker. So on the CESO marketplace, we sell properties, but also access to property related services. Next slide, please, Shane. So as a buyer, you can come onto our platform and search for a property you want to buy. And we sell properties currently in Nigeria, in Ghana, some in Dubai. We're about to be launching into Kenya as well. So we sell properties specifically on behalf of property developers, reputable developers such as Landmark. So not only can you buy properties, but you can also access the other services you need to buy that property with trust. So next slide, Shane. So we sell properties and access to property related services. We work with developers, but you can also access law firms such as UBO, access banks if you are wanting that your finance, insurance. So we've created this unique one-stop shop for property transactions to this unique ecosystem of services that connects buyers with trusted properties and professional service providers. So it's a one-stop shop for property transactions. Next slide, please, Shane. Now, this is a view of the beautiful buildings that Paul at Landmark will be constructing, with a feature of the properties on the left. Today's webinar is a theme that we at CESO as real estate brokers get asked a lot when involved in the sale of this particular type of real estate, that of off-plan. We are therefore delighted to be using Landmark's Waterview Apartments as a case study to understand the risks and opportunities when it comes to buying this type of real estate. And as mentioned, these are the wonderful residential buildings that will form part of their unique wider site at VI. But to start with, I think that what we should do is sort of ground this discussion in what we mean by off-plan. So we have a working definition of it. So next slide, please, Shane. So the definition that I propose is off-plan property refers to property which is available for purchase before it has been constructed or finished. So let's repeat that. The term off-plan property refers to property which is available for purchase before it has been constructed or finished. So construction on the property may have started, it may not have started. CESO have dealt with both types of properties, where we're selling properties that before construction, before land has been moved, but also properties that are really further down the construction timeline. And in many cases, the properties that we've dealt with, the construction timeline has been disrupted because of COVID. So it would be really good to understand from a legal position if there are any remedies that can be put in place there. This is the definition that I've proposed for everybody today. I think it's probably a definition that most people understand. It's going to be interesting to understand what the legal definition is. From a legal perspective, again, we can ask the lawyer a little bit later on, but the reference to availability for purchase before it had been constructed could cover a number of potential situations. So, for example, off-plan properties where construction hasn't started pose an entirely different risk as well as an entirely different opportunity to those properties where construction has started and even where they've nearly finished. Next slide, please, Shane. Now, in terms of feedback that we have had from buyers, what are the opportunities, what are the risks? These, just to sort of further couch the conversation around our own experiences. And could I also say, if everybody else has had other experiences that differ from these, please send them through and we'll ask the question. But as an overview to risks and opportunities that need to be managed, here are some of the issues that, as I say, we regularly get asked about. So let's have a quick run through of the opportunities. Price locks. So one can potentially lock in a price now and benefit from the capital appreciation that will take place during the course of the build and once the build has completed upon finish. Discounted price purchases. Now, we can all ask Paul if he's generous enough to provide people with discounted on multiple purchases, but that may be available. You can buy now and pay later over the course of the construction period, which may take up to 4 years. And you've also got customization of options, which specifically refer to interiors. And that may be of huge relevance to you if you want to rent the property, want to turn it into a rental property to collect the yield. The risks, these are some of the main risks that we've also experienced when people wanting to buy off-plan properties. Builder trust. So this is obviously of huge importance and something that CESO tries to negate through working with trusted developers. So what has the developer previously built? What's their track record? What's their reputation? A falling market, this is some macro opportunities. So if you're able to buy an off-plan property at a price which, when it's fully built, may be at a bit of a discount, but the market falls below that point, well, what are the remedies, if any, there? But it's certainly something to consider when buying. Another big one for us is failed expectations and timelines. So if, for example, COVID comes along and disrupt timelines, what are the legal remedies, if any? And this is something that we've encountered. And finally, financing issues. Are there any remedies around, for example, if the developer lacks the financing to complete the build? Similarly, if on the buyer side, what happens if you don't have the financing to complete the repayment process? What are the potential repercussions? What are the remedies, if any? So that provides a bit of an overview, an introduction to today's webinar. That's enough of me talking for the time being. So Shane, next slide, please. I'd now be delighted to introduce everybody to Mr. Paul Oyewibi. So let me provide an introduction to him. Paul is Group Chief Executive Officer and founder of the Landmark Group. He began his career in the built environment with a formal education in architecture, property development, and construction management, together with a London Business School MBA merit in valuing engineering. Paul has over 25 years of experience of design and execution in projects in Africa, US, and Europe. He served as development director with Beacon Housing in the UK. Paul was the executive with the responsibility for property and logistics team of Regis PLC during their rapid expansion years, which oversaw the opening of 190 business centers globally. He has expert knowledge of commercial property and workplace management and led Landmark's expansion into America, Europe, and Africa. He's raised in excess of $100 million of funding for Landmark and grown the company to achieve a PwC endorsement book valuation in excess of 300 million. Paul is an African business leader with a deep and passionate interest in real estate in Africa, driven by his goal to create the first Pan-African real estate and services organization themed on his live, work, and play philosophy. And we're delighted for Paul to join us today. So Shane, could we come off sharing the screen so we can we can begin the interview. I forgot to mention that Paul is also an avid Arsenal fan, and is also a Nigerian Dragon. So we're delighted to have Paul join us today. So Paul, we spoke very briefly before this that I had you on the panel. So before we sort of start getting into those issues that I've raised around risks and how as a developer you mitigate those risks as well as the opportunities, it would be great to get your overview on the current state of the Nigerian real estate market in light of everything that has recently happened or not so recently happened.
Thank you very much, Philip. I like what you said when you were introducing CESO Global, and I think it's long overdue in a place like this. And when I say a place like this, I mean a fast-growing emerging market where property should really be the anchor and the basis for the industrialization of the urbanization process. That's good. One of my favorite words before was transparency and authenticity, and I think you can bring both to this package. I mean, in terms of, to answer your question directly, just in terms of where are we today in real estate and where were we, say, pre-pandemic? So just to understand the impact of the pandemic, I've always called it a black swan event, and the black swan event is called that because of its absolute rarity. There were three things that happened. We had three black swan events, just for people for impact, for people to understand that this wasn't just a pandemic. We had the commodities price crash, the oil price crash. So, the currency effects. We had the unrest, which the NSAS highlighted, and obviously we had the pandemic. And everybody has a view on the quality, the authenticity, and the transparency of the different leadership platforms there are today, right? So we're dealing with multiple crises at the same time. Right, and the real estate industry is heavily affected for a number of reasons. One is it's always a long-term investment. It's not a trade. It's not just a simple transaction. So when you're buying a house or buying an office, it's not a transaction that you forget it within the next day or week or month, right? It's there for a long time, and then they're high-value investments which you expect a return. So what has happened? Obviously, it's slowed down a number of things, right? In some aspects, it's slowed down. First of all, 80% of quality real estate is import-based, right?
Yeah.
And because of the difficulties in international transactions, obviously it's slowed down that. So it slowed down the supply end. The demand end as well, the availability of cash and the certainty of the future, it's also slowed down the demand end. The financial institutions were not as brave, and it's a big part of real estate. Getting the right workers during a lockdown to create real estate was tough as well. So there's almost been a vacuum for about 15 months, which says two things. There will be a lack of quality supply for a short period of time, and then there will be potentially an oversupply after that. But I think the biggest change in real estate is not even the demand and supply dynamics. I think it's more about the future of real estate. I personally think that the pandemic is such a big black swan event. I mean, I think it's a game changer. I think it's a watershed moment in real estate. Real estate is going to be more technology enabled, I think, as we go along. I think in real estate, it needs to be more agile. I think that remote culture will grow. And as it grows, the way developers deliver real estate will change. I think spaces will change. People don't want to be kept in tight spaces and indoor spaces. You see corridors will be wider. I think you'll find out that even mechanisms in real estate like doors, revolving doors and hand doors, there'll be sort of less touching. And I think just the health and well-being of individuals, the borders between leisure and business are being collapsed or being grayed out, right? So I think you'll find that real estate will change to a large extent in terms of providing a better platform for businesses to enjoy leisure, and a better platform for you when you have leisure to actually do business as well. And it's basically on that basis that Landmark was created, right?
Wonderful segue.
Yes, so we feel very strongly that is the future of real estate. Is put everything in one place, make sure you get all the infrastructure in place, get all the qualities in place, get the customer services right, make people come to that place, and if you have everything together, then hopefully you're providing not just flexibility, but you're providing everything at a better cost, in a faster way, and in a more competitive way. And you know what happens in the world today? Convenience is everything.
I mean, there are a couple of really interesting points that you made there, particularly around, the 3 Swan events. I mean, we previously had a webinar around the opportunities around the capital depreciation story, particularly on the Naira side, in March, April. And that's clearly created opportunities for people, particularly people in the diaspora, to leverage that currency strength and buy, as you say, a long-term investment in this market. To sort of ground everybody's knowledge a little more into what you're doing at Landmark, could you sort of expand a little bit more on that the business leisure side? Because obviously, when I went through the presentation, part of it is on builder awareness, builder reputation, and you really have built a fantastic development down there that has shops, that has restaurants, that has leisure. Was it part of the strategy to add on, residential within the area that essentially could be built by yourselves, an already trusted developer?
Yes, no, absolutely. So it's a long story, but I'll tell you the short story. Basically, as you know, as you've already said it, we're a business, leisure, lifestyle organization. So our entire theme is to put everything in one place. And just to give you an insight into why we feel that way. So we cut across several industries. So in Landmark, as you see, you mentioned the retail and the entertainment and the shops. There's cinemas here. There are some residential buildings, there are office buildings, there's the health sector here. So we've got medical centers and medical services here. We've got education here. We host the Nigerian University of Technology and Management. So we're a multi-sectored destination. And our entire idea, we feel that, we're changing the whole unit economics of property from the square meter to people, right? And ultimately, property is about people. So our theme is get as many people in as you can, right? Make sure you entertain them, make sure they have a great experience, and make sure they tell other people when they come back. Because our currency is footfall. It's not the Naira or the dollar, it's the footfall. The more people we have in Landmark, the more successful we'll be. And just to give you an example, pre-pandemic numbers, we had about 50,000 people coming through every week, right? And that 50,000 people, the average spend of each of them was about 5,000 Naira daily. Right? If you do the mathematics, if my mathematics can work that quickly, that's about 12.5 billion Naira a year in revenues, right? Now that sounds like a whole load of money, but if you're going to build the real estate that we've built within the climate of currency depreciation, where 80% of what you buy and build is dollar-based, right? You find out you run out of money very quickly. So I have a principle that I don't think currently, and we were speaking off camera before, and you said you were showing me some existing prices of different real estates in different places, and how there was a big price difference in different places. And I said, I don't think that today you can build a world-class building, and let's say it's residential, right, for a price and sell it and make a 20% profit. I don't think you can. I think you will either change the price later on and hurt the people who have pre-bought or people who are buying, or you provide substandard, right? So because it's just costs too much to build, and the market cannot take the amount of money that that's required. So, and land is expensive depending on the location. So we felt, well, how do you make these dynamics work? And one of the key reasons why we introduced residential is for stickiness. It's for more people to come and actually stay there. So our average spend is 5,000 daily, right? Imagine if you can up it to 50,000 daily, because they both have breakfast and dinner at Landmark, as well as time to do other things within Landmark. So let's just say they eat 2 or 3 meals, and if it's either bought or made in Landmark, then they're spending 50,000 Naira daily. Now 50,000 Naira spent daily with the same number of visitors, and hopefully there'll be more, is now 125 billion Naira, right? The geometric increases, and that way you can build a property like the Waterview, right? You can subsidize the sales of it to a large extent, and you can provide a much better customer experience just from all the things that they can do in one destination without exposing themselves to the hustle and bustle of the city, right? So from an infrastructure point of view, you're better off because you have everything that's 24/7 light, 24/7 water, 24/7 security. You actually, I live here, as you know, and I work here. And I also live in Nigeria because I know we've spoken several times when we've been abroad together. When I come here, I don't leave here until I'm going to the airport, right? And that's because everything I need is in one place. So that's the philosophy and the principle of the landmark ecosystem, but more importantly, what we hope that Waterview will bring to people.
Okay, fantastic. So look, it would be good to jump a little bit more into the Waterview apartments specifically, because I know that a lot of people would be interested in the sort of, the details around prices and construction timeline. So in terms of pricing for the apartments, what are you what are you covering?
So we have all ranges of apartments, from studio apartments to 4-bedroom, 5-bedroom penthouses, and they range from 50 million naira to 500 million naira, give or take, right? So in terms of pricing, we've priced it on a square meter basis. Technically, it costs us the best part of $3,000 per square meter to build and to provide, when you include the build cost and the land costs. But we're pricing it at the figure that's probably at par with that. So depending on the size.
Okay.
Where it is.
Yeah. And in terms of the construction timeline, has it started, and when's the proposed finish timeline?
So we've done preparation. So many people ask this question, and I answer it in two ways. So for those people that have been to Landmark, they'll understand. For those that haven't been to Landmark, so Landmark is an ecosystem. Many things have started. So we've got all the infrastructure in place. Obviously, we've got all the leisure activities and all these other activities and experiences in place. And what remains to be built now, which is the last part, which is our 5th phase of Landmark, is this residential tower block. It's a 29-floor building. We're due to break ground in October. So we're thinking end of quarter 3, early quarter 4, and it's a 30-month project.
Okay, fantastic. And are there any repayment options over the 30 months, over the construction period?
Yes, absolutely. So to reserve a place right now, we take 1 million naira, and then you pay the first payment on the breaking of the ground, which will be September, October, and that's 10%. Then another 30% is paid at the end of the superstructure when we've built the structure of the 29 floors. The third payment, which is another 30%, is when we've enveloped it, when it's a watertight building, we put all the curtain wall in on it. And then the last payment is on completion and handover of your keys, which is 30%. So it's 10, 30, 30, 30. So we smooth it out, yes.
Great, and we can obviously share all those details with everybody. We can email them to them, everybody who wants those. In terms of the main contractor, obviously part of a concern that we get is who's the developer, who's the contractor. So who would be the main contractor on the build? Okay,
so I've got two answers to that question again, right? So the first answer is, first of all, we're a developer, and we've built 250,000 square meters of real estate in Lagos alone. And we've provided and managed probably twice that across the globe in 4 continents. So I'd like to believe that we're not just credible, but we're capable of providing real estate. So when we say we're going to do something, we basically do it. In terms of construction, it's slightly trickier in that we've looked at several construction companies. We've narrowed down to 2, and we're in final stage conversations with those 2. So I'm not really at liberty to call names, but what I will say is, between the 2 construction companies we're looking at, half of the buildings in Lagos that are over 25 floors have been built between these 2 companies. So there are not actually that many construction companies that you would feel are good enough and competent enough to build a 29-floor building in 30 months to the specification, to the international specification that we want and we expect. So I suppose if you're in this industry, you'll probably be able to guess the 2.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. So look, just a couple more questions before we jump over and speak to the lawyer who can speak to us about how to manage the risks when buying. But from a developer position, and we have spoken about this briefly before, what are the advantages? What are the opportunities that you see in an individual buying off plan, with obviously a specific tweak towards Waterview.
Yeah. So a number of things, and so I like to say sort of three things to answer your question, and without being indirect about it. So the first thing is, I would say when a purchaser wants to buy real estate, the first question one should ask oneself is, why real estate? Why invest in real estate? Am I buying a home to live in, or am I buying it as an investment, right? If it's a home to live in, then you choose what sort of home you want and where you want it. If it's an investment or both, then you've got to actually think a little bit harder about it. And I always say, if you're trying to buy real estate, what are the advantages? Understand what those advantages are and make sure you key into them. In my mind, the advantages are sort of threefold. Real estate has a very low correlation value. And what that means is basically it has less dependency on other industries. So it's a good portfolio diversifier, right? If you're invested in so many other industries, real estate is one industry that if you invest in, it's not as linked to the other industries in terms of diversification. The second thing, and you've mentioned this, is long-term capital appreciation. And it cuts across good real estate, bad real estate, and ugly real estate, right? Technically, it appreciates. And that's because it's tangible, it's real. It has so many uses. You can buy it as a house, you can use it as a shop, you can use it as a hospital, you can use it as an office, right? So it's tangible, it's real, and that's why it's called real estate. So it's a good investment platform. Now, moving on to that, you then say, what sort of real estate do you want, and where do you want to buy it, and who do you want to buy it from? So in my mind, the question is, why Landmark? Right? If you're looking at, say, Landmark, for instance, and forgive me, but I'm just using that as an example. So obviously location has to be one. You have to want the location it is, right? It's coming to. It may be views, say people coming to Landmark, say, look, I want to be by the water, I want to see the water, I want to play on Landmark Beach, I want access to goods and services, I want, so the location is important. The ecosystem is important, all the industries we talked about, and the infrastructure that's there, and then the credibility of the developer. Now, why Waterview, which is directly answering your question, is why would you buy off plan? Well, you've named most of the advantages and disadvantages of buying off plan. In our minds, the biggest advantages are, first of all, we've eliminated the middleman. And the problem with the middleman is, 95% of the middleman take a lot for nothing and don't often deliver what you expect, right? That's why we work with people like Sesso, and we work with credible agents that not only advise us, but also advise their clients independently in a transparent and an authentic way. So we're shortcutting the process where you don't have a whole series of agents, taking you to, driving you along the streets and looking over walls, right? So that's one big advantage. The second is locking in early, right? Enables you to lock into a much lower price. And I think we spoke earlier that a good way to look at the future is to look at the past. Now, it doesn't mean what happens in the past happens in the future, but it gives you a good insight as to what will happen. And real estate, for all the reasons I've mentioned, which, it's real, there is a capital appreciation value. There is a high dividend payout to it. And we feel that if you lock in very early, especially with our soft payment timelines, we expect to increase our prices at 10% almost every quarter, which means that over an 8 to 10 quarter period of the build, the price of it doubles. So you lock in early, hopefully you land in a good place. The third reason is the customization ability, just the ability to come in now, right? And customize how your apartment will look, where your kitchen will be, where your bathroom will be, how it looks, what's the finishes, what the colors. And those things are so important if you're buying a home. Or even if you're buying an investment, you want to tailor it in a way that is easy to manage, easy to let. And because we're in an ecosystem that has a hotel as well, and we have a hotel pool, a lot of the smaller apartments, we will put in the pool for a very small management fee. And all our hotel here and all the apartments around us are fully booked from Thursday to Monday, almost every week, literally just because of the entertainment platform that we have at Landmark. So I think just buying into that either as an investment or as a home, hopefully is beneficial too.
Yeah, fantastic. I mean, certainly some of the things that you've said there definitely resonate in terms of the feedback we've had, particularly around the finishing, around the capital appreciation, finishing with specific reference to rental yields as well.
Yes.
So look, Paul, many thanks for that, but don't go anywhere. We'll be hopefully taking some Q&A in a moment. So Shane, would you mind taking back to the the presentation so I can introduce everyone to Mr. Ekundeo Onajobi. Next slide, please. Fantastic, many thanks. So I'm delighted to introduce everyone to our next speaker. Paul spoke wonderfully about the opportunities of buying off-plan, things to look out for. Ekundeo is now to speak about how to manage those risks. So let me give him an introduction. He is Senior Associate Team Lead in the firm of UUBO, very prestigious Lagos-based law firm, and we're delighted to tell everybody that they are on the CESO platform. He focuses on capital markets, mergers and acquisitions, and real property transactions, in addition to general corporate matters. He has advised clients ranging from development finance, institutions, multinationals, property development companies, and individuals on matters across the entire value chain of the real estate space in Nigeria. From due diligence to sale and purchase, financing, property development, joint ventures, security interests, and perfection of title, he is very familiar with the prevalent issues and can create alternate transaction structures to achieve desired objectives. He's been recognized by Legal 500, a global ranking outfit, for his competence within the real estate space in Nigeria. So he is absolutely perfect to speak to about how to manage those transaction risks. So Shane, could you take us off the presentation? Ekundeo, many thanks for your patience. Thank you for joining us today. Really appreciate it. I thought an interesting starting point would be potentially for you to provide us with an overview of the property purchasing process in Nigeria, first of all, and then second of all, moving on to discussing how that process could differ when buying off-plan properties.
Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for that session, Mr. Wanabe. Just to answer your question, the property acquisition process in Nigeria generally is no different from what you have across the globe. The very first step is the property identification. For you to buy a property, you need to find the property you intend to acquire. So property identification is the first step. The second step is your due diligence, i.e. in terms of checking out the title of the seller, confirming that there are no encumbrances, confirming that it's not within any form of government acquisition. So that's due diligence. There's legal due diligence. There's also the physical due diligence, where you actually go on site to feel the brick and mortar of the property you intend to acquire. So you have your property identification, you have your due diligence. Then the next thing is also your documentation, your negotiation and documentation between yourself and the seller. And the final step is the perfection or the registration of your interest or your title at the relevant land bureau or land offices, or whatever the designation is. Now, for the purpose to zero in on what we're discussing, which is on off-plan property, that process is really not different when you're purchasing off-plan property. What just happens is that you may not be able to move from step 1, 2, 3, 4 as you would have done if it were a bare land or if it were a completed building. So I give you an example. For a developed property, you identify the property, you conduct your due diligence, legal and physical, and you enter into negotiations with the seller, you document your transaction, payment is made, documents are signed, and then you make your application for perfection. Very simple, easy breezy. But for your off-plan properties, it is still the same steps. However, there's also the element of time. So for the regular properties, all of this can be done and concluded in a matter of days, weeks, depending on urgency and financial capacity. But for the purpose of your off-plan properties, once you identify, now as when we started, you described the concept of off-plan as the purchase of a property that is about to be constructed or that is being developed. So you are not buying the brick and mortar. You are buying the concept that has been presented to you by email or by physical drawings as you have it. So what then happens is, in terms of property identification, you do that on paper. In terms of due diligence, you actually can conduct your due diligence, as it were, because the seller should have legal title, because that's really what you are buying, the legal title in respect of that land. So you can conduct your due diligence. So starting point, your property identification, unlike your developed property, is conceptual, not physical, as it were. You can conduct your due diligence. And then in terms of documentation and negotiation, you find out that you can agree the form of documentation. So typically in Nigeria, you will have two sets of documents that are signed. You have your contract of sale or your sale and purchase agreement, which talks about the entire transaction. It has the fine details, what you're buying, the condition precedents, and just like you have in the landmark property, it identifies the payment schedule, the instrumental payment. It talks about the entire fine details of the transaction, and then you have your deed of assignment. Now, for your typical sale, all of those documents will be signed, contemporaneously. But usually for your off-plan properties, what you usually have is you sign your sale and purchase agreement at the inception that talks about the global transaction, identifies the payment plan, talks about key milestones, deliveries, deliverables, and what have you. So when the property has now been fully constructed and has been handed over to you, then the documentation that you were required to register your title at the lands offices will now be also given to you in terms of a deed of assignment. So it is only at that point that you can then proceed to register your interest. So the same process for developed bare land or your off-plan, the slight twist to it is just the issue of timing, and then the fine details around payment plans, around key deliverables, around milestones. That's really just the difference. But in terms of the steps, they're really one and the same thing.
Okay, so as you say, it sounds as if the timeline's elongated, and payment is in line with construction milestones.
Yes.
If there are issues with the completion of those milestones, what remedies can be sought there? Did you get that question? Sorry, I think my network just dropped.
No, I didn't get you. I think.
Oh, apologies. Okay, so it's the internet gremlins. If there are issues around timelines, so timelines aren't achieved in the build, what remedies are available?
Sorry, the network keeps going in and out, so I didn't get you.
So are there any remedies for a buyer if the developer fails to meet to the construction timelines?
Yes. So these are some of the things that would have been agreed in your sale and purchase, as it were. So in that documentation, you will pre-agree the milestones, you will pre-agree the payment plan, and then it really depends on the contract. For some transactions, we've seen situations where if the seller or the developer is unable to deliver on the milestones, the project completion timeline is elongated due to their own fault, excluding force majeure events, as we have it. If it's within their control, we've advised on transactions where the developer committed to paying them the rental value of that property between the projected completion timeline and the actual deliverable, the actual delivery timeline. So those are some of the things you can do. And the starting point is this is a contract. So you have your rights, which you can enforce. And depending on what the parties agree, you can also agree the payment of interest, as it were. And as you remember when Mr. Wanebe was speaking, some people acquire these properties for investment purposes. So there's also the time value of money.
Indeed.
There's the time value of money. So what we typically advise is, the developer gets as long a time as you can, because if you are unable to meet those completion milestones due to a fault that is due to issues that are within your control, then you may have to start paying interest, or you may pay the rental value to the investor.
Very interesting. In terms of enforcement, it would be really good to get to pick into that a little bit more in terms of your experience. So let's say, for example, there were clauses on repayment that were based upon a build timeline, but the developer failed to achieve that timeline. the purchaser would then obviously have recourse based upon the contract. But how much would it actually cost to enforce? Because that could potentially disincentivize the buyer from, from essentially putting themselves back into the position they should have been had the contract been fulfilled correctly, which is obviously the sort of the basis of all contract law.
So, so yes, as you said, the buyer has the recourse and they actually can enforce if which we typically don't advise, but if they find themselves in court and the buyer is able to, prove their case to show their damages, they can always get that. Or even if they go to arbitration, as long as you can show that you're right, you have rights that have accrued, and there's been a breach of the contract, this buyer can actually sue or take steps to recover, either depending on what you want, because it depends on the stage of the project. For some people, they lose and they lose trust in the developer, and they just ask for a refund of what they've invested. So some people ask for refund. Some people go to court to establish the rights, get interest. So it really depends. But it's a situation that I find that developers don't want to find themselves, because the market is really one that, as a developer, all you are selling or what you're selling is your credibility. And once you fail on a project, what goes around to the market, and then that affects the investor's appetite in your subsequent project.
Yeah, absolutely.
But it's very enforceable.
And it's something that that we're all too aware of, operating in particular markets, that CESO works with reputable developers. And obviously what people want to know is, when you're doing your due diligence, presumably they want to understand what previous transactions, what previous developments this particular developer that they're buying off plan from have undertaken.
Yeah.
And that's something that is that something that you can do as a firm? Is it sort of establish due diligence on previous builds?
So that is actually, that establishing the veracity of previous builds is really not a legal issue. It's more factual, as it were. So if someone told you they've constructed the Eiffel Tower, it's public information. You find that out. So that's really not legal, but it's something we can always find out. It's something factual. If you tell me you've done this, no problem. Give me your building plan. Give me your building plan drawings. All of that will show that you actually did this. And we also advise our investors, much more than what is being said, go to site to feel the brick and mortar of what has been said, and then interact with the occupants of that building and see if they have any post-construction issues. And
so in terms of previous build, that would fall outside of a natural remit for you to look into when conducting due diligence on a particular transaction. That would be up to the buyer to look into without sort of legal.
That would fall outside of the legal due diligence. Yeah.
Okay.
So that's then. When I was discussing due diligence, I mentioned two things. I said physical and legal. So that will fall under the physical due diligence. What have you done before? Let us see what you've done before. You go to site to interact with other investors and see what their experience has been with this developer. Okay,
fantastic. Couple more questions. In case of developer missing out on finance, is there any recourse there for a buyer who, let's say, has contributed over a particular period, but then then the development isn't going to be finished? Is that a matter of they'll essentially lose the amount of money that they've put in, or are there any legal recourse?
Are you saying loss on the part of the investor as a result of the developer's inability to secure financing?
That's it. So they've maybe secured finance for half the project, but can't fulfill the other half.
Mm-hmm. So that goes back to the previous question, really. So those are the things that will have been provided for in the contract, and those language, that kind of language will really be very generic to say that if there's project delay for any reason at all. It could be financing, it could be construction, it could be mobilization, it could be deficiency on the part of the authorities for lack of for not obtaining the relevant permits. It could be 1,001 reasons. So what we usually do is to ensure that there are provisions in the contract that provide the investor. So for any and every reason that there is a project delay, you put in protective mechanisms for the investor. So if one of the reasons for the project delay is lack of financing, that would have been provided for, and the remedy would either be you pay me interest on my money, or you refund my money with interest. You know, 1,001 protective mechanisms would be put in the.
Fantastic. Ekinde, many thanks for that. I think from what I'm getting from it is that the various risks can be mitigated against, can be managed through contract.
Yes.
In terms of timeline, in terms of let's say the developer not being able to finance halfway through, but in terms, I mean, what we always say to our buyers is you've got to buy off a respected developer. Obviously, Landmark absolutely falls into that category. But sometimes, I mean, we've just talking from personal experience, we've had to remove developers because the construction timeline from until they actually started the development was just too long, and it just raised too many questions. So I no doubt some point in the future the development will start, but because it had been on for too long, it just raised too many questions for us to feel comfortable with. And then we sort of moved on from that. So look, I'd like to ask if Paul could join us just for the last 5 minutes, because we have a couple of questions here from the audience that, Paul, I think you may have answered this privately. This is one to Stella Okuzu, who's we're a huge fan of at Sesso's, and I hope she is well in the UK. But in terms of if you could just tell everybody who's also on the call, what plans do you have for sale of the apartments to Nigerians in the diaspora, and how will the risk of non-completion be mitigated?
So the first part is, so I can't remember what I said this, but we have 275 apartments. We've sold 92 already.
Wow, that's incredible. That's absolutely amazing.
33% have been sold. And of that 1/3, half of them were sold to people in the diaspora. And the reason why people in diaspora bought it, because for those that don't know the history of Landmark, we're basically a UK, New York company before. So we've done a lot of work in Europe and a lot of work in America. So they know us. So yes, half of the people have bought from the diaspora, and we actually have an office selling the properties in diaspora. So that's the first, I suppose that's the answer to the first. In terms of the answer to the second, as I said, as an organization, our reputation, we're not a DIY developer, and we're not doing one transaction. This is what we do for a living. So the only way we do a next transaction is make sure the one we did before that was good. So we have all the legal arrangements in place, and you're not paying anyway until you're paying in stages, so you're seeing what's coming up. So I suppose just with the history of the clientele, the history of our successes in the past, and the strength of the legal agreement, hopefully that will assure you that you would get what it says on the tin.
Yeah, absolutely. And are there any mortgages available for buying at Landmark? Have you any relationships with any of the banks?
Yes, we have a relationship with Standard Bank, with Stanbic. So there are mortgages available, and we're trying to increase the mortgage playing field, and we're in conversations with a couple of others, including the NMRC, to underwrite some of the mortgages. So yes, but they're long-term mortgages, so they're 20-year plus mortgages. They're low double digits.
Okay. In Nairas.
And it's a Naira mortgage, yes.
Okay, fantastic. All right. Okay, so a couple more questions on the actual developments themselves. This is stuff that we're being asked. Any idea yet on the service charge for the development?
Yes. So we can only estimate it. So service charge is not a profit item. Service charge is a recovery cost. So a lot will depend on the cost of things there, but we have our own sort of independent power plant here. So that helps us control and reduce costs significantly. But we estimate the service charges to be in the region of something like 20,000 Naira per square meter. What does that mean in real life? It means a 3-bedroom apartment would be approximately 2 million Naira a year in service charge.
Okay, fantastic. Well, look, Paul, we're coming up to the end of the hour. Ekundeo as well. We thank you so much for joining us for this hour to discuss what is in essence a very topical subject around buying off-plan property. We clearly know that there's huge opportunities when venturing into this type of purchase for things like capital upside, capital appreciation, even negotiating sort of decent below market values before purchase, so that on exit there can be a nice profit. Equally on the finishing, you get nice finishing during its construction stages. You can then go on to rent it at a decent yield. As Paul says, property investment is a long-term investment. We're all here because we passionately believe in the growth of Lagos and the ability for property to really sort of capture some of that growth. But also, I think there also has to be a realization around how to mitigate the risks, mitigate the risks in terms of buying off plan. But look, before I sign off, I have actually been hit by one more question. Let's do one more question. So this is from Mr. Sheriff Al-Arab. Is there likely to be a breakdown of milestone timelines for the payment as well? So if people want to sort of sign up, will they be made aware of the timelines that will be hit?
Yes, that will all be in the sale and purchase agreement. So all the timelines will be there. And in very rough terms, if we break down in October, that's 10%. 12 months later, we expect the superstructure, the frame to be up. That's another 30%. 9 months after that, 12 months, we expect the cladding to have been done. That's another 30%. And approximately 11 to 12 months after that, we expect the building to be finished.
Okay, fantastic. And we can circulate those details to everybody who's on the call. Now, this is a question from Andre. In terms of the quality of the construction work, what measures are put in place to ensure the contractors or subcontractors are using standard materials and executing construction to best practice?
A good question. Well, we build to international standards, so we take pride and we build to long-term standards. So perhaps if you've come to Landmark, you see what we have, and we intend this to be better. We're not only building to best practice, we're also building to global environmental standards, sustainability as well. So we've got
Fantastic.
quite a green elements included within. And that's all contracted, and we monitor it closely. We have a team of 88 people here that all they do is measure the quality of both the property and the services.
Okay, so I believe we have one last question from Emeka. This is looking beyond the 275 units that are planned, but any further developments after the 275 units around the same locations? And the second question was, as a Pan-African firm, any developments planned outside of Nigeria? So Nairobi, Accra?
Yes, exactly those two.
Boom, that was the... okay, there we go. That's answering both questions very succinctly. So Paul, thank you so much for joining us today. We really, really appreciate it. Everybody listening, we will follow up with further information in relation to the development itself. Please do get in contact with myself. Shane, would you just mind bringing up the presentation again? Just anyone who wants to get in contact with me, I'm based in Lagos. So if you wanted to meet, and we're obviously representing Paul's wonderful property, so please do get in touch. I think the presentation isn't working, so at this point I'd sign off to everybody. Thank you so much again for joining. Have a great afternoon.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
Thank you very much.